Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of The Bullet. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. Joining me today, straight from Central Florida, Mike Piwowarski. Mike, of course, of the Rundown and Arms Room Radio. Mike, thanks for coming along for the ride today, man.
Always a pleasure, Paul, to be here with you and all the folks out there and the Second Amendment Foundation.
Very cool. Lots to get to today. The big news, I suppose, is the second story I have in show notes, and that's that a federal judge tosses gun possession case against a convicted felon. This is off the Reload, and I'm going to read just a little bit out of the center of the article. The government's arguments for permanently disarming Mr. Bullock, however, rested upon the mirage of dicta buttressed by a cloud of law review articles that do not support disarming him, Judge Reeves wrote in United States versus Bullock. In Bruin, the state of New York presented 700 years of history to try and defend the early 1900s era gun licensing law. That was not enough. Bruin requires no less skepticism here, where the challenged law is even younger. The ruling marks the first U.S. District Court to strike down the federal prohibition on convicted felons possessing arms. Though its opinion only extends to the defendant Bullock, it will undoubtedly add fuel to the growing legal fire over who can be prohibited from purchasing or possessing firearms following the Supreme Court's decision in 2022's New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. It could help motivate the Supreme Court to step in and further expound on where the limits of the Second Amendment protections lie. Big case here, it's not earth-shattering, but earthquake invoking news. Mike, I want to get your thoughts off the start.
Yeah, great case, and it's going to make good case law. We'll see how it works around the country and if it works its way up higher. I want to take a quick little trip in my time machine back to the Founding Fathers days and talk about criminality back then. You, Paul, remember it was called high crimes and misdemeanors, right?
Yes.
There was high crimes and misdemeanors. And if you were convicted, you got a couple of different kinds of sentences, right? You either got some forced labor, you got some time in the stocks down in the square, and then once you were done with that, your punishment was over. Nothing was held against you. You were deemed okay to go back to society. But if you were one of these high crimes individual, a felony individual, you went away, and you went away until you were either rehabilitated and came back, or you never came back at all, which is what mostly would happen when they sent them away to the little penal camps, right?
Well, there was one more fairly common punishment. They found a long rope and a short rope and a long limb off a tree.
Yes. So that you definitely weren't coming back from. But if you did manage to find your way back from a camp or whatever, your sentence was over. There was no longer any restrictions on you. But remember, it was designed so if you had people that were, these criminals, this criminal element, they went away. They were gone. We didn't have to worry about who was out here that wasn't a convicted felon or not, because there weren't any. Convicted felons were gone.
Yeah.
So in today's day of criminal justice, we don't see felons going away forever. So this is a difference between now and then. So at some point, and this is what's being forced here, and we know that Judge Amy Coney Barrett talked about this as well in her confirmation hearings. If your time is up and your punishment's been served, you should be back in. You should have all your rights and privileges now that you're back in society. If you're not, and if somebody says you're still a threat, well, then you shouldn't be out. Okay. So I think this is forcing the hand. If you're telling me he's okay to be back in society, then he must be okay to be back in society with a firearm.
Now, to be clear, this Bullock is not a saint. The guy.
Oh no, absolutely not. Yeah.
The guy has felonies, and these are violent felonies.
Yeah. This is more of a conviction of the criminal justice system and our prison system than it is, a pass for this guy.
Yeah. We got an interesting comment. This one's not up in show notes, but let me see how much of it fits. Cabela's is under investigation for lax shoplifting prevention after 500,000 rounds of ammunition was stolen from its Christiana Mall store, the Delaware Department of Justice said in a statement Monday. Investigators believe that at least 500,000 rounds of ammunition were stolen from Cabela's in less than a year, and that a substantial portion of it was sold to drug dealers and other criminals in Delaware and Pennsylvania. Now, Mike, this is interesting. I've been to that store. I've got a picture on my Facebook profile pic, not my profile picture, but the picture behind that, whatever they call that, is right. Me and Miggy Gonzalez. Yeah, my banner picture is me and Miggy Gonzalez, his wife, and my wife, all standing in front of that store. Over a year, 500,000 rounds of ammunition. Well, a box is 20, couple boxes is 50. You know, this baffles me, man. This and how they're getting that this ammunition made its way to Delaware. I haven't had any chance to do research on this. Mike, you certainly haven't had.
No, listen, all I could think is, maybe it was those little milk carton bricks of 22 ammo. Remember that was the big demand for a while there, and because you could take 500 of those at a time and stick them in your pocket, but that still means you had to do that 1,000 times. I know this sounds more like some kind of organized theft off the back of the loading dock, into from instead of making it to inventory, just made it into the dumpster or the trunks of employees.
Well, and this might be a backdoor way of going at guns if we make it hard to impossible to get ammunition.
Well, good point.
Then they can have all the guns they want.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, and of course, Fast and Furious style, we'll sell what we steal to the criminals.
Yeah. Fast and Furious. There, that's a good one to trigger me off. Ooh, I started the Politics and Guns podcast, which was what became Polite Society. I started that when Fast and Furious was just barely squeaking out.
Okay.
And that whole thing, I mean, there should have been people removed from office and put in prison over that, all the way up to the Attorney General, Eric Holder, and who absolutely knew about it. And what did we get out of it? Not even a slap on the wrist for him.
Nothing. You get zero because that's the way they work, right? They're allowed to do what they want because it's the greater good for them. What they believe is the greater good. It justifies everything they do.
Yeah. And going back to that comment by John, I still want to know how they found out that a substantial portion was sold to drug dealers and other criminals in Delaware and Pennsylvania. You're talking several hundred miles from that store. How are they? Right. They don't have way to track ammunition like that. I don't think.
No, unless this was some big ongoing operation and they were watching this, and there sounds like there's a lot more to this story, and I look forward to getting into it and reading it and doing some research on it.
Yeah. Next one, and this one is actually the one at the top of my show notes that I put together today because I found this one first. The Academy of Doctors of Audiology, ADA, an independent medical group that focuses on evidence-based practices in the delivery of audio vestibular care, has circulated a letter to Representative Jeff Duncan and Senator Mike Crapo. Both of them, one of them is a South Carolina Republican, the other a Republican from Idaho, supporting the deregulation of suppressors through the Hearing Protection Act. Their rationale is simple. Suppressors are a tool that can help prevent noise-induced hearing loss and other hearing damage. Quote, as an independent medical group, the Academy of Doctors of Audiology has absolutely no vested interest in suppressors outside the positive impact they have on hearing conservation, said Knox Williams, executive director of the American Suppressor Association. Their endorsement of the Hearing Protection Act, which would give law-abiding citizens improved access to suppressors, highlights the importance of these tools when it comes to firearm safety, and we applaud the ADA for putting this letter together and actively supporting hearing conservation. Evidence-based, where was it? Evidence-based practices. They focus on evidence-based practices in the delivery of audio vestibular care. Sounds like some people looked at real data and thought, guns are used so rarely in crime compared to how much they're used for practice and for preventing crime that suppressors might be a great deal.
Yeah, the problem with suppressors is that everything that most people know about suppressors they get from the movies, and they believe that once I screw a suppressor onto the tip of my 9mm, it makes it silent, and it's going to be an assassin's weapon. And that's the bad rap it gets. We know that it just takes it from the damaging over 120 decibels to below it to about the 100 decibel mark. Unless you're using some sort of powderless 22, that's going to be where all suppressors sit. It means you could like you said, Paul, you can target shoot, you can go indoor shooting, you can go hunting, and you don't have to worry about permanent hearing loss from the hearing damage. We saw support like this from the Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership a few years back as well during President Trump's first 2 years, and we would have had the Hearing Suppression Act would have passed if it hadn't been for Paul Ryan and his Trump derangement syndrome over how Trump beat Mitt Romney in the primaries. Otherwise, except for again politics and hatred and the swamp, we'd have had this. But it's good to see from these doctors. This is something that it's now on the radar again. If a Republican president gets elected, whoever the nominee happens to be, we still hold the House now. If we hold the House then, this should be one of those things that could pass, right?
Should be. Yep. That's the whole thing. We've got to, in order to get what the other side, what the other side has now, we have to win huge, because it has to be. We have to take over convincingly the Senate, and we have to expand what we have in the House, and we have to win so big in the presidency that it goes above the advantage you have when people in graveyards vote.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, but I would listen at the next election. To get Republicans in both houses of Congress in control and the Republican presidency. Obviously, presidency we have to worry about the dead people voting and all the fraud that occurred, right? But how about a 5% increase? Give me 2-3 more senators, and give me 10 more Congress people, and I'll be all right. I'll be all right with that. I think that's a margin we can live with.
Absolutely. I'm going to get a comment in here quick. John's correcting me. Christiana Mall is in Newcastle County, Delaware. Well, the reason I was confused there is because let me go to that original comment again. The reason I was confused is because the Christiana, Tennessee has a Cabela's.
Okay. Gotcha.
And that's where I stopped with and met. That's where I met Miggy and his wife. So
okay, gotcha.
So yeah, I mean, if the mall's in Delaware, then yeah, then
okay.
It's
A
more
little more
likely.
sense, but still, yeah, a little more sense, but that's still an awful lot of ammo to move without anybody noticing over a year.
Yeah. We get this next one in here, and this is a guy down by you, Representatives Matt Gaetz from Florida and Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia, not that far away, plan to take on the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Once again, that should be a convenience store, not a government agency. Overreach by hitting Dr. Steve Dettelbach where it hurts, the pocketbook. The two members of the pro-gun House Freedom Caucus plan to take congressional action to attempt to zero out Dettelbach's paycheck. They announced the new move on Monday at a field hearing in Florida where people talked about the ATF's abuse of power. The Bureau has been criticized for tactics many consider heavy-handed and intended to make an environment hostile to the gun industry and firearms owners. Under the Biden administration's anti-gun plan, the ATF has used its power to curtail the constitutionally protected gun rights of Americans to bear arms. These attacks on Americans' rights include the reclassification of pistols with stabilizing braces as short-barreled rifles that must be registered with the federal government in accordance with the National Firearms Act. This is again, it's got zero chance in the current makeup of Washington, D.C., but I love the attitude and I love the push. And it's a small little bit of moving that Overton window. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, saying that the ATF has been heavy-handed with the industry is like saying Hitler was heavy-handed with the Jews, right? I think that's quite the understatement there. We talked about this on I think it was the Weekly Bullet last week where we talked about false flag or not false flag. I lost the term. When they bring forward these bills and they know they have no chance, but they're trying to make a good face, showing that they are paying attention. It wasn't grandstanding. I can't remember the term. Charles Seller said it. Oh boy.
And
I'll remember as soon as we're off the air. I'll remember it. Yeah. Yep. But there's a chance, right? If they could tie this into the omnibus, right? Because under the Holman rule, which is back in play, they can suspend his paycheck, based on his outside activities. So he's been doing things outside the government, and we know that because listen, he was on the payrolls for many of these anti-gun organizations.
Yeah,
it's where they plucked him out of. So if they can say, okay, listen, you get to keep your job, we're not going after that, but under the Holman rule, we decided that you're not going to get your paycheck. Virtue signaling. We know that his paycheck would immediately be supplemented by the Bloombergs, or that kind of thing, or at every town group. But I think it shows that Congress is not afraid to, stick their finger in your eye, and start digging around in there. And even though it may not hurt you, it's still going to, have an effect on the community when Congress says this guy's doing the kind of job that we just took his paycheck away from him for.
I want to get a comment in. Just came in from George Geller about our last comment we went left turn on. Channeling Gavin Newsom, they must have traced the gangbangers' ammo back to Cabela's using the serial numbers on each of the bullets. And
it's in the micro stamp.
They did. Yeah.
It's in the micro stamp. Yep. I'm sure they're able to figure out where the boxes came from, but it's one of those. How do you know if you're a law enforcement officer in Pennsylvania that found a bad guy with a box of ammo? It's not standard procedure to run the serial number and the bill of lading numbers on the side of it to figure out where it came from. There had to be more. There had to be some sort of a joint investigation going on to begin with, I would think. It's not a standard thing to go, well, let me run the serial numbers on your box of ammo here.
And
it's not a serial number. Remember, it's the shipping codes, all that stuff, so they know where it ended, where it was supposed to be.
Well, they know the
lot
lot numbers.
The lot numbers.
If the criminal drops the box of ammo at the crime scene, they would know the lot number.
Correct, the lot number. That's what I couldn't find. Pulling words today. I was too much time in the sun today.
Yeah, and you know, I'm gonna carry this box of federal HST ammo with me. I'm gonna pick up the brass, but I'm leaving that box. I mean,
yeah. Yep. Yeah. Which, ironically, right, is the way that they found some American ammo in the Ukraine, right? Recently, have you heard that story? There was
no.
There was some ammunition being sold, and it was supposed to be American use only. When they sold it to one or two of these companies, and those companies immediately shipped it over to the Ukraine, and it's being used over there.
Well, you know what? If it's being used for Ukrainians to defend Ukraine, it's a great deal, man.
Well, that would be good, right? But I think it was ended up in the Ukraine, and it was kind of one of those. I think everybody had access to it, kind of stuff.
Then maybe not so much.
Yep.
This one, I want to move to the last story on the show notes next. I think we're going to end up spending most of the rest of the time we have talking about it. Florida jury finds former Parkland school resource officer not guilty on all counts. This is off Fox News. A Florida jury has found former Parkland school resource officer Scott Peterson not guilty on all counts. Peterson faced 7 counts of felony child neglect and was the first law enforcement officer in the U.S. to face criminal charges stemming from his alleged inaction during an active school shooting. He was also charged with 3 counts of misdemeanor culpable negligence in relation to the adults shot in the building. Additionally, he was charged with perjury for allegedly lying to detectives. Peterson would have faced prison time and loss of $104,000 annual pension if convicted of the child neglect charges. This is we all seen the video of the officer retreating when gunfire broke out, and what came out in this story that surprised me, Mike, is he said, look, I couldn't tell where the gunfire was coming from. I thought there may have been multiple shooters. I have never been a police officer myself. I cannot put myself in this guy's shoes, but if I'm facing this way, I cannot tell for sure if the gunfire is in front of me, or I think it may be in back of me, and it sounds like it may be a little bit stronger in back of me. What looks like him retreating could have been him running towards the gunfire.
So here's what I know. And again, I've got 20 years in law enforcement in Florida, and this is justice served. Scott Peterson did nothing wrong that day, and I don't know Scott Peterson, never met him. I can tell you that there's 11 buildings on that campus, many of them 2- and 3-story buildings, flat concrete sides. And when the shooting started, he was 11 buildings away from where the shooting started. You immediately see him on the video. He was in the coach's room there, hop out with a couple of coaches, or there's a coach in his room with him. They hop out, they get on the golf cart, they start doing exactly what you described. I think the shooting's over there. Wait, it might be over there. Hold on, it might be over there. And it took Scott Peterson just under 3 minutes to finally get to the building that he believed the shooting was coming from, and it actually happened to be from that building. And as he got to that building, he heard the last 3 shots, and that was the end of it. And waited and waited and waited because he'd heard the last 3 shots, and that was it. And by that point, Cruz had stopped shooting, had gone and blended in with the crowd and slipped out the back door with a bunch of the other students. Remember, the shooting took 3 minutes. Peterson was on campus for 5 before leaving. Took Peterson that 3 minutes to get there. If Peterson had as soon as he got to that door, ran inside and ran up to the 3rd floor where the shooting was going on, it would not have made a difference. Would have made no difference at all. No difference in the loss of life there. Of the people being shot. I'll say it that way. Could he have done first aid? Listen, anybody could have done first aid, so I don't want to rule that out. He did, of his 30-year law enforcement career, he did exactly what he was taught to do for 28 years. The first part of his career, he was taught, get there and surround the building, set up a perimeter, and call for the SWAT team. The second part, after the Columbine shooting and after the shooting in Sandy Hook, that changed to, you no longer I'm sorry. After that point, it changed to when you get there, you grab your partner and you go in. You move to the sound of gunfire. You no longer wait for SWAT team. You no longer set the perimeter up. You go in. After Sandy Hook, that changed to don't even wait for your partner. Get behind your badge, pull your gun, and go find the bad guy, because we know 99 times, right, Paul, they end as soon as confronted. Either,
yes.
They put themselves, they allow themselves to be killed by the cop, right, or they commit suicide. Even if he followed that policy that he knew his last 2 years, because that was new policy, new idea, nationwide, he still didn't have time to do that. Scott Peterson did nothing wrong that day. Now, there's a number of other cops that were out there that pulled down the street a couple miles away, a couple 100 yards away, got out of their cars, opened their trunks up, and turned their radios off and sat there for 20 minutes because they didn't want to go inside, because they were flat-out yellow cowards is what they were. And they should be in jail awaiting trial now. I've got no problem saying this guy's a coward. He should be in jail. Listen, it's not an easy job, okay? If you can't move to the sound of danger when the horn goes off, put your gun down, put your badge down, and go home. The job's not for you. I get it. Listen, I'm sure a rookie fireman has decided he can't go in a building when it's burning. I'm sure it's happened in every job out there that somebody thought they could do. I know, as a guy who's been a soldier for a number of years and gone to war and gone to battle, that you don't know until the time happens. But once you know, it's time to change careers. Okay?
Sure.
And Scott Peterson moved to the sound of gunfire and got there 11 buildings away with all the echoing as it ended. By the way, Paul, if he had driven his golf cart at high speed straight to where the building was that the shooting was, he still would have only had 30 seconds to get upstairs. Okay? There was no way for Scott Peterson to shoot and kill Cruz.
Let me get a couple comments in here. First one is from John. He says the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in DeShaney versus
Castle Rock,
Winnebago
Gonzalez,
that the town of Castle Rock versus Gonzalez, that the police agencies are not obligated to provide protection of citizens. Police are well within their rights to pick and choose when to intervene to protect lives and property of others, even when a threat is apparent. That is true, and I figured, again, I'm learning more after the court case than I knew before the court case. But even if he were at the right building, I would think that because of that Supreme Court ruling, he probably still would not have been found guilty.
But that doesn't mean Florida law couldn't have charged him with neglect, and they did charge him or convict him of neglect. Listen, the Castle Rock case was a domestic violence case, and she told them, he's going to kill me. Can you come help? And they said, no, there's no current threat. And she died. She was killed. And the ruling was they don't have that duty to protect. So a good point. Great comments. It just I'm sure Scott Peterson is relieved. I'm sure he still feels horrible. I mean, listen, for the rest of his life, this guy's going to go to bed knowing 17 people died on his watch, and knowing that he happened to be 11 buildings away when it happened. It's just absolutely respectful. And listen, don't you think that Cruz didn't know that? Remember, he was a student there. He knew where the SRO's office was, and he knew this was the furthest building away when he made entry. Okay, He knew this gave him the best shot to do the body damage. Sometimes, Paul, it's not the job for you. And I know the law says, and the case law says, there's no duty to protect. But guess what? If you worked with me, and you were one of those people that was a yellow coward, you'd be out of a job before you knew it. We'd run you out of town because we don't need any cowards trying to back up the rest of us that are here to protect and serve.
Why couldn't we have had about 20 or 30 clones of you in Uvalde?
What a catastrophe that was. Just absolute. Listen, and I don't know if we've talked about this before, but I'll say this. There's two things that are they're very contagious, all right? Cowardice and bravery. They're both very contagious. When the first guy shows up and says, and he's a supervisor or the first guy in the scene, whatever he is, and says, "Get behind me, boys, we're going in." All those people that were standing behind him with indecision, it's gone at that point. Now they're a fire team and they're going to find the bad guy. But when the first guy shows up and says, "Well, hold on, I think we're going to wait for SWAT and get some special weapons here," everybody else behind him goes, "Phew, glad I didn't have to make that decision. I'll stand here and be safe." They're both very contagious. Law enforcement, military, I'm sure it's the same in the fire service.
All right, one last comment, and we got to get out of here, man. Again, from John. John's on fire tonight. John says you are your own first responder, and that John and you and I'm sure can all agree on that.
Very quickly, you and I talked about this a couple of times. If just the people that had concealed weapons licenses in that school were allowed to carry them past those gun-free zone signs, we estimated that there would be 18 people in that school with guns, teachers, staff, whatever it happened to be. Mm-hmm. That's probably 1 or 2 per building. You think this guy gets in there and gets more than 1 or 2 shots off? I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I really don't. All right, we are past our 30 minutes we're allotted, man. Before we go, though, I'm going to take another minute or two. Tell us about Arms Room Radio. Tell us about the rundown and anything else you want to plug, bud.
Yeah, so don't forget, listen, the rundown, that's daily at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We come on just before the bullet here. You can check us out there, any place you watch podcasts or videos. And then Arms Room Radio, we've been on for 9 years now, 9 years. It's Saturdays, Eastern Time, 3 to 5 p.m. Go to armsroomradio.com. You can listen to the live feed or find what stations we're on and listen locally. And don't forget, we'll see you all up in Detroit for the women's shooting event with Rick Ector on July 29th and 30th.
I forgot you were going to that. And matter of fact, I was talking with Susan about that today. We have finally, and this is something, all the trainers that go up to Rick's event, they do it on their own dime. We pay to go there to do this, and we do it for a good reason because we feel like we're making a difference. And I cannot wait for that thing to come up. By the way, if you are a trainer, get in touch with me or Mike. Either one of us can direct you on how to get into some of the best trainers in the country are going to be there doing this. You can help us out. Get in touch with either me or Mike, and we'll get you connected with the right people so you can go up to Detroit and make a difference yourself the end of July.
That's it. Some of the best trainers in the country and Charlie Cook.
Charlie's not going to be there this year.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, horrible news. Horrible news.
All right.
We kid, Charlie. We kid.
Yes. We kid because we love. I'll put it.
We do.
Yeah. Okay. That's going to do it for us today. Everybody, thank you for listening. Everybody, thank you for commenting. Even those of you, and there were many of you who did not get your comments on the air. Thank you, everybody, for commenting. Podcast listeners, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.